Tonight we step away from the glow of screens and the hum of modern life, and into the profound, palpable silence of a stone corridor. The air here is cooler, thicker, smelling of old wax, damp rock, and something faintly animal. Your feet, clad in simple leather, whisper against the worn flagstones. You are not a visitor here. You are a new arrival, a novice, and the vast, echoing weight of this medieval monastery is your new world. Your head is shaved in the tonsure, a ring of cold air you're still not used to, and the coarse wool of your habit itches your neck. Survival here isn't about braving the elements, though that's part of it. It's about surrendering to a rhythm of labor, prayer, and silence so complete it feels like a type of gentle drowning. You probably won't last a week without complaining about your back. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your first real task, assigned not by the stern abbot but by the perpetually ink-stained Brother Lucas, the monastery's master scribe, is deceptively simple. Feels like a test or perhaps a joke. He points a long, bony finger out the window of the scriptorium, towards the muddy yard where the monastery's flock of geese honk and squabble. The primary ingredient, he says, his voice a dry rustle like parchment, is out there. Collect a basket. Be thorough. He turns back to his work, his own quill scratching a steady, patient rhythm across a creamy page. You are dismissed. You stand there for a moment, holding an empty wicker basket, the instruction hanging in the air. Primary ingredient? For ink? You think of dark, mysterious liquids, of alchemists' potions. You do not think of geese. But this is your duty. You step out into the yard, the cold morning mud oozing between your toes. The geese, magnificent and arrogant, eye you with a disdain that feels deeply personal. Their white feathers are mud-spattered, their black eyes bead bright and suspicious. The widely accepted historical fact is that the most common writing ink in the medieval period was iron gall ink, a recipe whose core ingredients were surprisingly mundane and organic. But one of those ingredients is currently trying to bite your ankle. You learn quickly. The primary ingredient is not the goose itself, but what it leaves behind. Everywhere. The yard is a chaotic mosaic of it. You are gathering goose droppings. Specifically, you are on the hunt for the richer, darker ones, which Brother Lucas will later explain, with a completely straight face, are higher in the necessary ammonia content. This is your introduction to the medieval mindset. Nothing, absolutely nothing, is wasted. Everything in God's creation has a purpose, even goose excrement. The ammonia, released as the dung ages, will later act as a mordant, helping to fix the ink's color to the parchment. It's a humble, smelly, and utterly essential beginning. Your basket grows heavier, its aroma rising in the cool air. You try to breathe through your mouth. You think of the beautiful illuminated manuscripts you glimpsed on Brother Lucas's desk, the gleaming gold leaf, the intricate borders of vines and beasts. You think of the sacred words they contain, the psalms and gospels that are the heartbeat of this place. The disconnect between that sublime beauty and the contents of your basket is so vast it's almost funny. This is the lesser-known, amusing historical detail. The path to preserving divine scripture for eternity often began on hands and knees in a poultry yard. Historians still argue whether the preference for goose dung over chicken or pigeon was due to its superior chemical composition, or simply because geese were more commonly kept in monastic communities for their feathers, meat, and formidable guarding abilities. As you work, the initial shock wears off, replaced by a grudging focus. You learn to spot the promising droppings, to use two flat sticks like tweezers to lift them. You become an unwilling connoisseur. The honking of the geese, which was an assault at first, fades into a kind of white noise, punctuated by the distant call of the office bell from the chapel. This is your life now. This simple, smelly task is your first stitch in the vast, invisible tapestry of monastic labor. You are not making ink yet. You are gathering a catalyst, a humble agent of transformation. The basket fills. Your back aches. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet question forms. If this is the beginning, what in heaven's name comes next? The basket of gathered dung is left in a covered stone trough in a shaded corner of the yard, a place where it can mature without offending the daily routines of prayer. Its transformation, a slow, quiet alchemy of its own, will take weeks. Your education, however, moves on immediately. Brother Lucas summons you back to the scriptorium, but not to the writing desks. He leads you to a smaller, sunlit alcove where the air smells of clean, dried dust and faintly of cooked horn. On a rough-hewn table lies a scatter of long, white feathers, the primary wing feathers, the primaries, plucked from those same geese. A word is a thought given shape, he murmurs, picking one up. The ink is its blood. But the quill is the finger that traces the shape, the nerve that carries the thought. A poor quill makes for a clumsy thought. He places a feather in your hand. It is surprisingly strong, light, and hollow, the shaft cool and smooth. This is not yet a pen, it is a raw material. Your next task is to make it into one. The process is methodical, almost ritualistic. First, you must temper it. You take a small handful of fine, dry sand from a pouch hanging on the wall and pour it into a shallow iron pan sitting on a brazier of coals. You watch the sand heat, a shimmer rising from its grains. Historians still argue whether the sand was merely to provide consistent, gentle heat or if specific minerals in the sand were thought to improve the quill's durability. When the sand is hot, you bury the feather's hollow calamus, the lower shaft, in it. The heat drives out residual oils and moisture, hardening the keratin. It doesn't cook, it anneals. You leave it for a precise count of breaths. Brother Lucas insists on this, not minutes, before pulling it out. It feels different now, slightly more rigid, less like a feather and more like a potential tool. Now comes the cutting. This requires a knife sharper than any you've ever held, a penna coltello whose edge is maintained with sacred devotion. Brother Lucas demonstrates once, his old hands moving with surgeon's certainty. He trims the very tip of the quill at a steep angle, creating a slanted face. Then, with a series of tiny, precise cuts, he sculpts a nick down the center of the slanted tip to create the slit that will channel the ink. Two smaller, curving cuts on either side to shape the shoulders of the nib. Finally, a delicate horizontal slice across the very point to blunt it slightly into a writing surface. A perfect quill nib is a masterpiece of microengineering, flexible enough to yield under pressure and create thick downstrokes, yet springy enough to snap back for thin upstrokes. The widely accepted historical fact is that the goose quill, prepared in this manner, was the dominant writing instrument in the West for over 1,000 years, only truly supplanted by the mass-produced steel nib in the 19th century. Your first attempts are disastrous. You cut the slit too deep and the nib splits in two with an audible, heart-breaking snick. You shave the shoulders unevenly, resulting in a nib that scratches and catches on the parchment like a claw. The lesser-known, slightly amusing detail is that scribes often developed very personal, even superstitious, relationships with their quills and knives. Some would only cut quills under a certain light, at a certain hour, or after a specific prayer. A poorly cut quill wasn't just bad craft, it was a minor spiritual offense, a hindrance to the holy work of copying. Brother Lucas watches your failures without comment, only pointing to the growing pile of discarded feathers. Your fingers cramp. You develop a newfound hatred for geese. But then, on maybe your 10th try, something happens. The knife feels less like a foreign object and more like an extension of your intent. The cuts are cleaner. You shape the nib, and it holds. You dip it briefly in a cup of water to test its flexibility, and the two tines of the nib bend together and apart in perfect, silent unison. You look up. Brother Lucas gives the faintest nod, a movement so small you might have imagined it. He points to a ceramic pot on a shelf. Inside are dozens of finished quills, their nibs all uniformly shaped, a forest of potential pens. You will need many, is all he says. You look at the single good quill in your hand, then at the pile of uncut feathers. The ink is not yet a dream, the parchment is a distant concern. Tonight, you have learned that before a single word can be born, the hand that writes it must first be forged. The quill-cutting blisters on your fingers have just begun to harden into calluses when you are pulled from the scriptorium's precise silence. Brother Lucas has not forgotten the other essential ingredient, the one that grows on trees, not under geese. He hands you a coarse linen sack and a stout walking staff. Go with Brother Florian, he instructs. Listen. Do not touch anything unless he permits it. Brother Florian is the monastery's herbalist, a man who seems constructed from root and bark himself, with a beard like tangled lichen and eyes the color of forest pools. He smells of dried mint, earth, and something more astringent. He greets you with a grunt that might be friendly and leads you out of the main gate, away from the cultivated gardens and into the dense, shadowed expanse of the Nemus Sacrum, the sacred wood. This is a different world. The ordered chants of the chapel are replaced by the chaotic symphony of wind in leaves, bird call, and the crunch of last year's beech mast underfoot. The path is narrow, the canopy thick. Brother Florian moves with a swift, silent gait you struggle to match. You are not here for firewood or game. You are on a specific, seasonal hunt. We seek the oak's misbegotten children, Florian says, his voice a low rumble. The apple of the tree, born not of flower, but of wound. He is speaking of galls. Oak apples. Specifically, the hard, marble-like growths formed when a specific species of gall wasp lays its eggs in the tender bud of an oak tree. The tree, insulted by the invasion, swells its tissues around the larva, creating a protective, and for us, incredibly useful, prison of concentrated tannin. The widely accepted historical fact is that these oak galls, particularly those from the Quercus infectoria species, were the single most prized source of tannic acid for iron gall ink across Europe. Their potency was legendary. But finding the right ones is a craft. Brother Florian stops beside a great, gnarled oak. He points, not to the branches, but to a scatter of round, brownish objects on the leaf litter below. These are old. Spent. The wasp has flown. He picks one up and crushes it in his fingers. It is light, hollow, and dust-filled. We need the young, the hard, the heavy. He finds one still attached to a low twig. It is smooth, firm, and has a slight greenish tinge beneath the brown. He taps it with a knuckle. It sounds solid. This one still holds the bastard within. Its strength is at its peak. The lesser-known, surprising detail is the sheer variety of galls, and the specific preference scribes developed. The perfect gall for ink was not just any gall. It was the Aleppo gall, named for a region in the Levant, prized for its near-perfect spherical shape and exceptional tannin content. Monasteries traded for them like spices. Your local oak galls are serviceable, Brother Florian explains, but a scribe illuminating a gospel for a bishop might demand the imported ones, a tiny extravagance for the glory of God. Historians still argue whether the preference for specific galls was based on measurable chemical superiority or was largely aesthetic and traditional, a scribal snobbery not unlike a modern chef insisting on a particular variety of sea salt. You spend hours in the dappled light, your eyes learning to scan the oak trees for the telltale round lumps. You learn to judge them by weight and sound. A good gall feels like a denser piece of the tree itself. You collect them carefully into your sack, the rough linen growing heavy. Brother Florian names other plants as you walk, this one for a poultice, that one for dyeing wool, the other poisonous unless boiled thrice. The forest transforms from a wild place into a vast, living pantry and pharmacy. Your task feels connected, a small part of a vast understanding. The galls themselves are strange things. They look like lost wooden toys, these perfect spheres grown from a tree's pane. Each one represents a battle between tree and insect, a stalemate of biology that you will soon recruit into the service of preserving human thought. The sack is full when Brother Florian signals the return. The walk back to the monastery feels shorter, the sack on your shoulder a tangible yield. You have not yet made ink, but you have captured its soul, the bitter, astringent heart of the oak, the chemical key that will bind with iron to create a blackness that time itself struggles to erase. You return the sack to Brother Lucas in the scriptorium. He takes one, rolls it in his palm, and nods, a gesture of satisfaction. He places it on the table next to your one good quill. The two raw materials now sit side by side, the instrument and the pigment source. The journey from here is one of breaking things down, of release. The galls, innocent in their sack, now demand violence. Brother Lucas leads you to a small flagged courtyard behind the kitchen buildings, a utilitarian space where the aroma of baking bread tangles with the sharper sense of lye soap and wet stone. Here, in a corner sheltered from the wind, sits a heavy, flat granite mortar stone, its bowl-shaped depression darkened and polished by generations of grinding. Beside it lies a matching granite pestle, its handle smooth from countless palms. Strength is not the goal, Brother Lucas intones, placing the sack between you. Thoroughness is. You must become a force of gradual persuasion. You pour a handful of the hard, round galls onto the mortar's stone. They click together like ancient coins. Your first instinct is to bring the pestle down with a crushing blow. You try it. The result is a loud crack, a few flying fragments, and the gall skittering away mostly intact. Brother Lucas says nothing, but his silence is a lecture. You retrieve the fugitive gall. The correct method, you learn, is one of steady rotating pressure. You set the pestle's head on a gall and begin to grind in a slow, circular motion, using your body weight to bear down. At first, nothing seems to happen. Then, with a gritty, reluctant sound, the gall begins to fracture. It doesn't shatter. It disintegrates from the outside in, turning into a coarse, brown grit. This is the first step in unlocking the gall's power. Inside that woody shell is a complex cocktail of chemicals, primarily tannic and gallic acids. Your grinding is a physical act of liberation, vastly increasing the surface area that will later be exposed to your liquid mediums. The widely accepted historical fact is that the fineness of the gall powder directly influenced the ink's quality and stability. A coarse grind could lead to a grainy, unstable ink that clogged the quill or flaked off the page. You settle into a rhythm. The circular grinding is monotonous, meditative. The sound is a low, rhythmic crunch, like walking on perpetual frost. Your shoulders begin to burn. The pile of whole galls diminishes, replaced by a growing mound of aromatic rubble. The lesser-known, slightly amusing detail involves the aftermath of the wasp. As you grind, you occasionally find them, the small, desiccated husk of the larval invader at the very heart of the gall. They are tiny, brittle things. Some scribes fastidiously pick them out as impurities. Others, like Brother Lucas, who watches you work with a folded arm detachment, considered them part of the mixture, a bit of added organic matter that would simply dissolve in the fermenting brew. The wasp created the house, he says, seeing you pause over one. It is only fitting it contributes to the work. It's a darkly pragmatic bit of medieval logic. You sweep the tiny carcass back into the growing pile of powder. But coarse grit is not enough. The first grinding only reduces the galls to the consistency of rough sand. Brother Lucas produces a second tool, a finer ceramic mortar and pestle. You must now take handfuls of the coarse grind and reduce them further, to a powder as fine as the roughest flour. This stage is dustier, more delicate. A fine tan powder coats your hands, your forearms, the front of your habit. It gets in your nose, a dry, sour scent that makes you want to sneeze. Historians still argue whether some monastic recipes called for literally sifting this powder through a fine cloth or silk sieve to achieve absolute uniformity, or if the variation in particle size was simply accepted as part of the ink's character. Given Brother Lucas's expression, you suspect sifting would be considered an effete luxury. Your job is to grind until your arms tremble and the powder passes his silent inspection. Finally, after what feels like hours, it is done. Before you lies a humble mound of tannin-rich dust, the transformed essence of the oak's defiance. It looks like nothing special, like dirt from a particular path. But this powder is the anchor, the foundation of your black. Brother Lucas scoops it into a clean, dry pottery bowl with a wooden spatula, ensuring not a grain is wasted. He covers it with a damp linen cloth to keep it from blowing away. The tree has given up its strength, he says. Now we must persuade it to dissolve. Tomorrow we introduce the sour spirit. The powder for now rest. Your own muscles sing a chorus of complaint. You have taken something whole and made it small, vulnerable, ready to be changed. The alchemy is no longer a concept. It is in the ache of your arms and the dust under your nails. The sour spirit does not reside in the scriptorium, nor in the herbalist's hut. Brother Lucas sends you down, deep down, into the monastery's undercroft, a cavernous, vaulted space beneath the refectory. The air here is a good 10 degrees cooler, a constant, damp chill that seeps through your habit immediately. It smells profoundly different, a complex, layered aroma of wet stone, fertile earth, and the unmistakable, sharp sweet tang of fermentation. This is the cellar. Your footsteps echo in the gloom as you move past rows of towering barrels, their iron bands faintly gleaming in the light of your small, shielded tallow candle. Some hold last autumn's apple cider, its yeasty scent still active. Others contain beer, a darker, earthier smell. But you are here for the wine, or more precisely, what wine becomes. Brother Martinez, the cellarer, is a man of impressive girth and a perpetually purple-stained lower lip. He is the guardian of this subterranean kingdom of transformation. He greets Brother Lucas with a familiar nod and listens to the request. For the scriptorium, Lucas says, holding up a sturdy, glazed ceramic jug. The sharpest you have. Not the drinking stock. Brother Martinez's eyes twinkle. He leads you to a corner where the barrels are smaller, older. He taps one, and the sound is duller, less resonant. He inserts a wooden tap, and what streams into your jug is not rich red wine, but a clear, pale liquid that makes your eyes water from 3 feet away. Vinegar. Acetum, the Latin word that holds both the bite of sour wine and the promise of potency. This is your acidic medium. The vinegar will perform several crucial functions. It will begin to dissolve the gall powder, extracting the tannic acids into solution. It will provide the acidic environment necessary for the forthcoming chemical reaction with iron. And, as a bonus, its slight antiseptic quality will help discourage mold in your ink pot. The widely accepted historical fact is that medieval ink makers used whatever acid was readily available. Vinegar, acetic acid, was most common in wine-growing regions, while in places like the British Isles, sour beer or even cider vinegar would have been the default. It was a pragmatic use of local, often spoiled, resources. Brother Martinez fills your jug to the brim. A pious offering, he says with a grin that suggests the line between pious offering and offloading undrinkable stock is deliciously thin. The lesser known, Amusing detail is the occasional tension between the cellarer and the scribe. A cellarer's pride was in producing good, stable wine that would not turn to vinegar. A scribe's need was for the very product of that failure. Historians still argue whether some scribes specifically cultivated vinegar mothers, the gelatinous scoba-like biofilm that turns wine to vinegar, to ensure a consistent, high-acidity supply, or if they simply relied on the cellarer's occasional disappointments. As you carry the heavy, sloshing jug back up the worn stone steps, the pungent aroma rising to greet you, you suspect Brother Lucas has a long-standing arrangement with Brother Martinez. One man's failure becomes another's fundamental ingredient. Back in the courtyard with the mortar stone, the process continues. Brother Lucas directs you to pour the entire mound of fine gall powder into a large, wide-mouthed earthenware crock. Then, slowly, you pour in the vinegar. It's not a dramatic reaction, not a hiss or a fizz. It is a quiet marriage. The pale liquid darkens immediately upon contact with the powder, turning a murky, yellowish brown. You stir with a long, clean stick of hazelwood. The mixture becomes a thick, grainy slurry, a sour, earthy perfume rising from the crock. It looks deeply unappealing, like the mud from a particular bog. You stir until Brother Lucas is satisfied the powder is fully saturated, no dry clumps remaining. He then produces a handful of additional, unexpected items. A few rusty iron nails, some thin filings from the blacksmith's shop, and a small, crumpled piece of what looks like blooded cloth. The vitriol of Mars, he calls it. The nails and filings are obvious, they are your source of iron. The cloth is a mystery. Brother Lucas explains it is a rag used to wipe the forge, soaked in the sweat of worked iron. It, too, goes into the crock. This is not fastidious chemistry, it is holistic gathering. Every possible source of the metal is welcomed. The iron, in contact with the acidic tannin solution, will begin its slow work, but the main event is yet to come. For now, the crock's contents are primordial soup. Brother Lucas places a wooden lid loosely on top, not sealing it. It must breathe, he says, and begin its conversation with the air. He instructs you to stir it once a day with the hazel stick. You leave the crock in a cool, dark corner of the courtyard, a humble vessel holding a potential that is, for the moment, brown, sour, and utterly inert. The conversation begins not with words, but with a color. You return to the crock the next day as instructed, to perform your first stirring. You lift the wooden lid, and the aroma that wafts out is stronger now. A sharp vinegary punch layered with that deep, earthy tannic scent. You take up the hazel stick and plunge it into the thick slurry. As you stir, folding the heavier sediment up from the bottom, you see it. A faint, sickly greenish hue is beginning to creep into the murky brown liquid near the surface, like moss on a stagnant pond. It's subtle but undeniable. This is the first sign of the transformation, the initial flirtation between the iron and the tannins. The nails and filings you added are not passive. In the acidic bath of vinegar and tannin, they are under a slow, relentless attack. The vinegar corrodes the iron, and as it does, the iron ions are released into the solution. These free iron ions then seek out and bind with the tannic and gallic acids from the crushed galls. This union forms a compound called iron gallotannate. In its liquid state, suspended in this acidic soup, it has that faint, ominous green color. The widely accepted historical fact is that this iron tannate complex is initially soluble and pale, but upon exposure to oxygen from the air and later from the parchment itself, it will undergo a further reaction, precipitating into an insoluble, intensely black pigment that binds tightly to the writing surface. Your stirring is not just mixing. It is inviting the air in, catalyzing the change one molecule at a time. You continue your daily ritual. Each visit reveals a slow but steady progression. The green deepens, becomes more pervasive. It is the color of a bruise of old copper of a stormy sea. The slurry itself thickens slightly as the solids continue to break down. The lesser-known, surprising detail is that some ink recipes from this period call for truly bizarre iron sources beyond nails and filings. Recipes have been found specifying iron from the rings of old barrels, from ancient swords, or even from the water in which blacksmiths had quenched red-hot metal. The belief was that the iron, having been worked or used, carried a kind of latent potency, a memory of fire and purpose that would transfer to the ink. Your forge rag, now slowly disintegrating in the crock, is a nod to this superstition. Historians still argue whether these different sources produced chemically distinct inks, or if the variability in the final product had more to do with the inconsistent tannin content of the galls and the vagaries of fermentation. After a week of stirring, the green is dominant. The mixture now looks like a witch's cauldron brew, a swirling opaque olive drab. It has also developed a faint metallic scent beneath the vinegar and tannin, the smell of wet rust. Brother Lucas inspects it one afternoon, dipping a sliver of clean white wood into the liquid. He pulls it out, examines the streak it leaves. He nods, a gesture of grim satisfaction. "The green is good," he pronounces. "It shows the marriage has taken. But the marriage is young, impatient. It must rest and deepen and learn patience itself." He has you place a heavier stone on the wooden lid, sealing the crock more firmly though not airtight. The active daily stirring phase is over. Now the mixture must ferment. You leave the crock in its corner. The visible, active part of the iron's work is done. The nails, now pitted and thin, lie at the bottom, still leaching their essence. The green liquid sits above them, a sleeping potential. The transformation from green to black will not happen here, not in the crock. That final, magical shift requires a different catalyst. Oxygen delivered not by your stirring, but by the tip of a quill dragging the liquid across a porous page. For now the ink in waiting is green. It holds its blackness in promise, a secret written in the language of chemistry, waiting for the moment it will be breathed into permanence. Patience is not merely a virtue here. It is a raw material, as necessary as the galls or the vinegar. With the crock sealed under its stone weight, your direct interaction with the ink ceases. But you are reminded of it constantly. The courtyard where it rests is on the route from the dormitory to the chapel. You pass it 4, 6, 8 times a day, following the canonical hours. Each time, your glance flicks to the dark corner. Nothing changes visually. The crock just sits, a squat, silent participant in the monastery's rhythm. But in the silence, a slow, invisible frenzy is taking place. This is the fermentation. The mixture you sealed away is far from sterile. It teems with wild yeasts and bacteria introduced from the air, the galls, the vinegar itself, even from your stirring stick. These microscopic labors are now at work, breaking down complex organic compounds into simpler ones. They are finishing the job of extraction that the vinegar began, pulling the last of the tannins and other soluble materials from the gall solids and the other organic detritus. The process generates a slight, constant pressure. If you press your ear to the crock's lid on a quiet afternoon, you might hear the faintest, most occasional blip, a tiny gas bubble escaping from the thick sludge below. It is the sound of the ink digesting its own ingredients. The widely accepted historical fact is that this fermentation period, which could last from several weeks to several months, was critical to the ink's stability and depth of color. A too short fermentation could result in a weak, fugitive ink that would fade to brown over time. A properly fermented ink developed a richer, more complex chemistry, producing a black that was not just a surface stain, but a penetration. You are learning that ink making, like faith, operates on a timescale indifferent to human urgency. The office bell marks the hours, but the crock marks a slower, more profound passage. The lesser-known, slightly amusing detail involves the occasional catastrophic failure of this stage. Sometimes, the wrong microbes won the battle. Instead of a useful fermentation, you'd get a putrefaction. The crock, one day, would smell not of sharp tannin and metal, but of rotten eggs or worse. The mixture might grow a colorful, fuzzy coat of mold. When this happened, the entire batch was a loss, poured out onto the midden heap with a quiet curse. There are marginal notes in monastic records that hint at this frustration. A scribbled atramentum corruptum est. The ink is spoiled, next to a recipe. Historians still argue whether some monasteries developed starter cultures from successful batches, adding a ladleful of old, good ink mixture to the new to inoculate it with the right microbes, much like a baker maintains a sourdough starter. For you, the waiting is an education in detachment. You have other duties. You cut more quills, your technique improving from merely disastrous to consistently mediocre. You help in the kitchen garden, you memorize psalms in the chill of the early morning chapel. But the ink is your first real project, a thread of continuity. You learn to gauge time not just by the sun and the bell, but by the subtle changes in the courtyard. The ivy on the wall turning a deeper green, the angle of the light shifting day by day. The crock becomes a fixed point, a silent companion in your novitiate. Then, one morning about 5 weeks after you sealed it, Brother Lucas stands before the crock as you pass. He has lifted the stone and the lid. He doesn't summon you, but his posture is one of assessment. You hover at a respectful distance. He dips a clean wooden rod into the crock, pulls it out, and examines the droplet that clings to it. It is no longer the opaque olive green, but a darker, more translucent hue, a deep, smoky gray-green, like the ocean before a storm. The surface of the liquid is clear, the heavy sludge settled firmly at the bottom. The vinegar sharpness of the smell has mellowed, blended into a deeper, more rounded aroma, like old leather and wet stone. He nods to himself, then looks at you. It has slept long enough, he says. Tomorrow, we wake it, and separate the spirit from the clay. The patient fermentation is over. The messy, physical work of bringing forth the ink is about to begin again. The clay is a formidable sight. After its long sleep, the contents of the crock have stratified into distinct, unappetizing layers. At the very bottom lies a dense, black sludge, the exhausted remains of the gall solids, the dissolved iron filings, the pitiful skeletons of the nails, and all the other insoluble dregs. Above that is a thinner, murky sediment, still in suspension. And floating on top is the clearish, dark gray-green liquid, the spirit Brother Lucas referred to, your ink in potential. The task now is surgical, to separate the precious liquid from the solid waste without merging the two again. It is an operation of cloth, gravity, and a staggering amount of patience. The tools are simple, almost laughably so for the importance of the task. Brother Lucas provides a large, clean, new pottery bowl and a frame he assembles from 4 smooth sticks lashed together at the corners. Over this square frame, he stretches a piece of finely woven linen, tying it taut with cords. This is your filter. He positions the frame over the empty bowl. The process is agonizingly slow. You must ladle the top layer of liquid from the crock with extreme care, trying not to disturb the sleeping monster of sludge at the bottom. The first ladleful is the easiest, but with each dip, you venture closer to the mire. You pour the ladle's contents onto the center of the stretched linen. The cloth bows under the weight, and the liquid begins to seep through, dripping, plink, 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 into the bowl below. What passes through is clearer, but not yet clear. It carries a faint haze. The linen catches the larger particulate matter, but the finest sediment passes through. The widely accepted historical fact is that this filtration was often a multi-stage process. A first pass through a coarse cloth, like this linen, would be followed by a second, slower filtration through an even finer material, sometimes felt or even a specially prepared layer of sand. Brother Lucas, watching the steady drip, seems to deem the linen sufficient for now. The quest for perfect clarity, it seems, has its practical limits. The lesser known, messy reality is that this process almost never went perfectly. The cloth could clog. A slip of the ladle could stir up the sludge, ruining a whole batch. The frame could collapse, dumping filtered and unfiltered ink together in a catastrophic, staining deluge. As you work, ladle by careful ladle, you develop a newfound, tense respect for the linen's integrity. The smell is potent here, concentrated. The deep, acidic, metallic tang now has a ripe, almost fruity undertone from the fermentation. Historians still argue whether some scribes added clarifying agents at this stage, such as egg white, which would bind to impurities and sink them, or a drop of oil, to skim off scum, techniques borrowed from contemporary winemaking and medicine. Your recipe, under Brother Lucas's stern eye, is one of simple mechanical separation. As the level in the crock drops, the operation becomes more delicate. You tilt the crock slightly, using a flat stone as a wedge, to access the last of the clearer liquid without tipping the sludge into the ladle. It's a balancing act. Finally, you are left with a crock containing mostly the thick, tar-like dregs. You set it aside. Even this waste has a use. Brother Lucas will later mix it with a little ash and water to make a crude, inferior paste for marking casks or rough wood. Nothing is wasted. But your bowl is not full of ink. It holds a cloudy, gray-green liquor. You must now filter it again. This time, Brother Lucas produces a different cloth, a piece of old, soft, worn woolen fabric. It's weaved tighter than the linen. You set up a new frame, transfer the liquid from the first bowl back into a ladle, and begin the drip, drip, drip all over again. This second filtration is even slower. The wool captures the finer haze. What emerges into the clean bowl beneath is transformed. It is now a translucent, luminous liquid. It is the color of a winter twilight, a deep, radiant gray-green that seems to hold light within it. It is beautiful, in its way. But it is still not black. And it is too thin. It would run off a quill like water, bleeding through the parchment. The separation is complete, but the ink lacks body. It lacks the substance to cling to the page. For that, you need a gift from a distant, sun-scorched tree. The substance arrives not from the cellar or the forest, but from the outside world. Brother Lucas retrieves it from a small, locked chest in the scriptorium, handling it with a reverence usually reserved for the Eucharist. It is a lump about the size of your fist, irregular, glassy, and the color of pale honey. It looks like a piece of fossilized sap, which is precisely what it is: gum arabic. This is the dried exudate, the hardened tears, of the Vachellia, formerly acacia, Senegal tree, which grows in the arid belt from Senegal to Sudan. It has traveled thousands of miles, likely passing through the hands of Muslim traders in bustling Mediterranean ports before finding its way to this silent stone cloister. Its value by weight is not far below that of spices. This gum is the binder, the final crucial ingredient that will transform your watery filtered infusion into a proper ink. Its purpose is twofold. First, it will thicken the liquid, giving it body, a viscosity that allows it to cling to the nib of a quill and flow onto the parchment in a controlled line, not a blot. Second, once the ink dries, the gum forms a thin, glossy film over the iron gallotanate pigment, binding it to the parchment surface and giving the written line a slight, desirable sheen. The widely accepted historical fact is that gum arabic was the binder of choice for scribes and artists for centuries due to its unique properties. It is water-soluble, colorless, and retains flexibility when dry, preventing the ink from cracking and flaking off the page. Brother Lucas places the precious lump on a clean slate and gives you a small hammer. Not dust, he instructs. Small pieces, the size of a lentil. You tap gently and the gum fractures with a satisfying crystalline snap. It shatters into sharp, translucent fragments. The lesser-known, surprising detail is that this gum was a major commodity in the medieval world, used not just in ink, but as a binder in watercolor paints, a glaze in confectionery, a thickener in textiles, and even in early cosmetics. The monastery's small stash represents a tangible connection to vast, invisible trade networks that stretch far beyond the Christian world. As you crush the gum, you are handling a piece of geopolitical and economic reality, all destined to hold a line of scripture on a page. Now you must dissolve it. This requires warm water, not the cold water from the well. You fill a small, clean copper pot from the kitchen and set it on a trivet over a brazier of low coals. You add the fragments of gum arabic. They bob and swirl in the water, slowly softening, not melting like fat, but dissolving from the outside in, clouding the water into a pale, viscous syrup. The process is slow. Too much heat can degrade the gum's binding properties. You stir with a sliver of wood, watching the liquid thicken. It becomes slippery, slightly sticky to the touch. The scent is faint, a clean, almost sweet smell like dried grass after rain. Historians still argue whether some monastic ink makers used local substitutes for the expensive imported gum, such as cherry tree gum or even boiled fish glue, and if so, how these alternatives affected the ink's longevity and appearance. The very fact that your monastery uses the true gum arabic speaks to its dedication to quality, or perhaps to the specific preferences of a long-dead, fastidious master scribe whose tradition is now law. Brother Lucas tests the syrup by dipping 2 fingers in, pulling them apart and observing the string that forms between them. He nods. It is ready. You now have your 2 prepared components, the bowl of filtered, luminous gray-green iron tannate solution, and the pot of warm, sticky gum arabic syrup. The moment of final mixing is almost upon you. But not yet. Brother Lucas has you let both cool to the same temperature. Blood warm. A shocked marriage is a bitter one, he mutters, a piece of alchemical wisdom that feels as much about monastery life as it is about ink. As they cool, you clean the workspace meticulously. The final vessel, a small, elegant pitcher of glazed ceramic, is set upon the table. Everything waits. The filtered liquid and the gum syrup sit side by side, one the color of a gathering storm, the other clear as honey. Separately they are useless. Combined with care, they will become the vehicle for thought itself. The combination is a gentle coaxing, not a violent union. Brother Lucas directs you to pour the cooled gum arabic syrup, now a thick, clear jelly, into the clean ceramic pitcher. Then, slowly, with the patience of a man pouring libations, you begin to ladle the filtered gray-green infusion into the pitcher with it. You use the hazelwood stick to stir, a slow, constant, clockwise motion. At first, the 2 liquids resist each other. The gum syrup clings to itself in translucent ropes within the paler ink base. But as you stir, persistence wins. They begin to merge. The mixture in the pitcher deepens in color immediately, turning from that luminous gray-green to a more serious, opaque charcoal gray. It is getting darker, but it is still not the profound black you are waiting for. This is where heat is reintroduced, but with a watchful, nervous eye. You set the pitcher into a basin of hot water, a bain-marie, over the coals. You must warm the mixture, not cook it. The gentle, indirect heat serves 2 purposes. It ensures the gum arabic is fully integrated and not clumping, and it accelerates the final chemical marriage that will bring forth the black. As you stir the warming liquid, you watch for the change. It begins at the edges, where the mixture meets the heat of the pitcher's sides. A darker tone bleeds inward, like a shadow spreading across a floor. The charcoal gray deepens to a blue-black, then to a true, bottomless black. It is a slow, mesmerizing transformation, the final act of the alchemy that began with crushing galls and gathering dung. The widely accepted historical fact is that this final darkening is the precipitation of the iron galatanate pigment. The heat and the continued exposure to oxygen from your stirring encourage the soluble, pale iron tannate complexes to combine and form insoluble, microscopic black particles. These particles are now suspended in the gum arabic solution, held in perfect, stable equilibrium, ready to be deposited on a page. You have just witnessed, in a humble pitcher, the birth of a color that will outlast stone. You stare until the entire contents are a uniform, velvety black, with not a hint of green or gray remaining. The surface of the liquid has a slight, oily sheen from the gum. You remove it from the heat. The lesser-known, slightly amusing detail involves the proof of the ink's quality before it was ever put to parchment. Some recipes suggest a drop of the finished ink should be placed on a clean fingernail. If it dried to a glossy, durable black that didn't easily rub off, it was good. Others tested its body by observing how it dripped from the stirrer. It should fall in a heavy, cohesive drop, not a light spray. Brother Lucas employs a more direct method. He takes a sliver of clean, white parchment scrap and dips the very tip of a prepared quill into the warm black liquid in the pitcher. He lets a single, perfect droplet form at the nib's tip, then touches it to the parchment. It sits there, a glossy hemisphere of black. He blows on it gently. It dries, not to a dull flatness, but to a slight, reflective gloss. He then takes the edge of his thumb and rubs it firmly across the dried drop. It does not smudge. The black is fast. It is permanent. A ghost of a smile touches his lips. It is the first you have ever seen there. Historians still argue whether the exact temperature and duration of this final heating was a closely guarded secret of individual scriptoriums, passed down as oral law, or if it was a matter of simple empirical observation. Heat it until it turns black. Given the reverent, precise way Brother Lucas monitored the basin of hot water, you suspect the former. The ink is now functionally complete. It is a warm, living black in the pitcher, its surface perfectly still. But it is not yet ready for the scribe's hand. It must be stored, and the vessel for storage is itself a product of the monastery's self-sufficient world. Brother Lucas produces it, a hollowed-out cow's horn, its wide end fitted with a tight wooden stopper, its tip neatly cut off to create a small pouring mouth. It is lightweight, durable, and non-reactive. The ink will live here. But first, it must cool completely, settling into its final character, before it is decanted into its new home. The ink now cooling in its pitcher is a possession. It has your labor in it, the memory of your aching shoulders from grinding galls, the sting of vinegar in your nostrils, the patient daily walks past the fermenting crock. But it is not yet a tool. A tool must be tested not by its maker but by its purpose. Brother Lucas clears a corner of a writing desk in the scriptorium, a shaft of afternoon light illuminating a motley collection of parchment scraps. These are the offcuts, the flawed pieces, the practice skins. They are precious but not sacred. He places the pitcher of now tepid ink before you. He hands you one of your own quills, the best one you managed to cut. Right? He says, the single word hanging in the dusty, silent air. This is the moment of truth and your hand trembles. You dip the nib into the black liquid. It feels different from dipping it in water for practice. The ink clings to the quill with a viscous affection. You bring it to a small, uneven scrap of parchment, its surface rougher than the fine sheets the brothers use for psalters. You touch the nib to the surface. It hesitates for a fraction of a second, then releases its charge. A line flows onto the parchment. It is black. Not gray, not brown, but a deep, solid, undeniable black. The line has a slight raised texture, a gloss where the gum arabic has pooled. You make a few strokes. A vertical downstroke which the flexible nib renders thick and dark. A horizontal cross-stroke, thin and precise. The ink flows smoothly without blotting, without skipping. It does not bleed out along the parchment's fibers in ugly tendrils. It holds its form. The widely accepted historical fact is that the true test of iron gall ink was not its initial darkness, but its permanence and its gentle bite. As you examine your test strokes, you can see the latter quality already at work. Where the ink lies thickest, it has slightly darkened the parchment itself, a faint brownish halo of tannin burn that will, over years, become more pronounced. This is the ink's slight corrosiveness, the same chemical action that binds it irrevocably to the page. It is a trade-off, a little destruction for immortality. A perfect ink was one that balanced deep black color with just enough of this bite to adhere, but not so much as to eat through the parchment over centuries. Your test lines, you realize with a swell of pride, seem to have found that balance. The lesser-known, amusing detail is that scribes were the ultimate quality control, and they were not shy with criticism. Marginalia in manuscripts sometimes complain about the ink supplied, atramentum pessimum, the worst ink, or librarius de mihi atramentum melius, bookkeeper, give me better ink. Some even sketched little cartoons of themselves pulling their hair out in frustration over a blotchy or fading batch. As you practice forming letters, you try to imagine a future monk, 100 years from now, looking at your clumsy test scrap in an archive and muttering about the novice who made such a serviceable black but whose letter forms were atrocious. Historians still argue whether the occasional poor ink found in otherwise magnificent manuscripts was the result of a bad batch, a scribe's haste in preparation, or the use of inferior local substitutes when supplies ran low. You fill the scrap with alphabets, with simple phrases, with a few wobbly attempts at the intricate knots used in illumination. The ink performs consistently. It dries quickly to that satisfying gloss. It does not clog the nib's slit. When you make a mistake, a blot caused by too much pressure, the black sits on the surface, a stark testament to your error. There is no erasing this. The permanence is suddenly, overwhelmingly real. This liquid you helped create is more final than a spoken vow. You look up from your test. Brother Lucas has been watching not your letters but the behavior of the ink itself. He takes the scrap from you, holds it up to the light, bends it, sniffs it. He gives a slow, single nod. It is a monumental gesture of approval. The ink has passed its trial. It is worthy of the horn, worthy of the scriptorium, worthy of the word. The making is over. Now it must be put to work. The approval is silent, but its consequences are material. Brother Lucas takes the pitcher containing your tested, proven ink and carries it to a sturdy oak cupboard against the scriptorium wall. From within, he selects a cow's horn, but this one is different from the raw storage horn shown earlier. This horn has been worked. Its surface is polished to a deep, golden brown gloss, smooth as a river stone. The wide end is fitted not with a simple stopper, but with a tight, toned wooden plug sealed with beeswax. The tip has been cleanly cut and then fitted with a small, delicately carved bone spout, like the beak of a tiny bird. This is not a storage vessel. It is a presentation vessel, the kind from which a working scribe would pour ink into his smaller, desktop inkwell. With the care of a priest handling chrism, Brother Lucas decants the ink. He uses a fine linen funnel to guide the black liquid from the pitcher into the horn's wide mouth. Not a drop is spilled. The ink glugs softly as it fills the horn's interior cavity, a sound of satisfying fullness. He fills it almost to the brim, then seals it with the waxed plug. The horn, now heavy with its dark burden, is set upright in a wooden stand on a shelf among others. Yours is the newest, its polish not yet worn by the grip of 100 hands. It sits in a beam of light, a humble, elegant object transformed into a repository of potential. Every word it will help write is held inside it, waiting. The widely accepted historical fact is that horn was the preferred container for ink in medieval scriptoriums for practical reasons. It was non-porous, lightweight, resistant to cracking, and, unlike metal, it would not react with the acidic ink and corrupt it. The shape was naturally functional, easy to hold and pour from. Your horn, now holding about a pint of ink, represents the scriptorium's working capital. It will be used, drop by precious drop, over the coming months. The lesser-known, slightly amusing detail is the occasional discovery of such ink horns in archaeological digs, still sealed, with the contents dried to a solid crust after 800 years. When carefully rehydrated by conservators, that ancient ink can sometimes be used to write once more, a ghostly echo of its original purpose bridging the centuries. Your horn, you realize, is not just for now. It is an artifact in the making. Brother Lucas does not give you the horn. That would be premature. Instead, he gives you a task that feels like a promotion. He points to a writing desk near a window, currently unoccupied. It is a simple, sloping wooden plane on a pedestal, its surface worn smooth and dark with use and oil from countless hands. Prepare it, he says. You are to make it ready for a scribe, perhaps for him, perhaps for another brother. This is the ritual of the desk, the setting of the stage for the act of writing. You begin by cleaning the surface meticulously with a damp rag, then a dry one. You fetch a pumice stone, a porous volcanic rock as light as a loaf of bread, and rub it gently over the writing area to create a slightly abrasive, perfectly level surface for the parchment to lie on. From a cupboard, you take the other necessary tools and arrange them with a newfound sense of ceremony. A smaller, lead-weighted ceramic inkwell, empty and clean, is placed in the round hole at the desk's upper right corner. A handful of pumice powder in a tiny dish, for smoothing the parchment. A stick of chalk, for ruling faint guidelines. A knife for trimming the parchment and for correcting errors by gentle, terrifying scraping. A fine sponge in a shallow dish of water, for dampening the parchment to make it more receptive to the ink. And, of course, a selection of quills, their nibs perfectly cut, resting in a groove. Historians still argue whether the exact placement of these tools was a matter of strict scriptorium tradition or personal scribal preference, a kind of medieval ergonomics. Under Brother Lucas's gaze, you place each item where you have seen them placed on other desks. It feels like arranging sacred vessels. Finally, you bring the new inkhorn from its shelf. You unstop it, and with a steady hand, you pour the black ink into the small desk inkwell. It fills to just below the rim. A single drop, like a black pearl, hangs for a moment from the bone spout before you write the horn and seal it again. The inkwell now holds the essence of your labor. The desk is prepared. The tools are laid out. The stage is set. The only thing missing is the parchment, and the mind and hand to inscribe it. You step back. The silent, sunlit desk now seems to hum with potential. It is a machine for making thought permanent, and you have just calibrated its most vital fluid. The parchment arrives not as a blank slate, but as a skin with history. Brother Lucas places it on the desk you prepared, a full folio, a folded sheet of creamy sheepskin, hair side slightly darker and rougher than the smoother, tighter flesh side. It has already been scraped, limed, stretched, and dried by the monastery's parchmenter, but it is not yet ready to receive the word. That preparation falls to the scribe, and today, by some unspoken decree, that scribe will be you. Not for a psalter, not for a gospel, but for a simple list. The monastery's inventory of beeswax candles for the coming season. It is a humble text, but it is a text. It will be written in Latin. It will be filed in a chest. It will, in its small way, become a record. First, you must prepare the skin itself. You take the pumice powder and dust it lightly over the surface, then rub it in with the flat of your hand. This fine abrasive smooths any remaining bumps, raises a slight nap. You then take the damp sponge and pass it, once, lightly, over the area where you will write. The parchment softens slightly, becomes more receptive. It must be damp, not wet. You feel the change under your fingertips. Then, with the chalk and a straight edge, you rule your guidelines. Faint gray lines for the tops and bottoms of the letters, a margin. The structure of the page emerges from the blankness. Your hand is steady. The ritual of preparation has calmed you. Now, you select a quill. You choose your best one, the one that passed the test. You sit on the hard stool, adjust the angle of the desk, position the parchment. The sun warms your back. The scriptorium is silent but for the soft scratch of other pens and the occasional sigh of a turning page. You dip the nib into the inkwell you filled. The black liquid rises into the quill's slit by capillary action. You touch the nib to the lip of the well to shed the excess. A single, perfect droplet hangs, pregnant, at the tip. You bring it to the parchment. The moment stretches. You are no longer a novice grinding galls. You are a conduit. The ink, your ink, is about to become language. The first word is Syrai, candles. You form the capital C. The downstroke is bold, requiring a slight increase of pressure, and the quill responds, flexing, delivering a thicker line of that deep, glossy black. The upstroke is light, a hairline. The ink flows without hesitation. It does not blot or skip. It is perfectly obedient. As you write, you become aware of the ink scent, released by the warmth of your hand and the friction on the parchment, that complex aroma of tannin and iron and gum, now the smell of work being done. The widely accepted historical fact is that the scribe's act of writing was the final, essential catalyst in the ink's journey. Only upon exposure to the air and the slightly alkaline nature of the parchment does the iron gall ink achieve its ultimate, insoluble blackness. The word Syrai dries before your eyes, darkening from a wet gloss to a matte, profound black that seems to sink into the skin of the page. The lesser-known, deeply personal detail is the immense psychological weight of this act for a medieval scribe. Every stroke was permanent. Every mistake required a laborious correction with a knife. The pressure to be flawless, when copying scripture, was a spiritual burden. For your humble inventory, the stakes are lower, but the sensation is the same. You feel the permanence in your wrist. Each letter is a commitment. You write the quantity, virginity, 20. The V is sharp, the G loops perfectly. The ink continues to perform, consistent, reliable. Historians still argue whether scribes developed a kind of muscle memory intimacy with their specific batch of ink, knowing precisely how it would flow on a given day with a given humidity, or if a good ink was simply a good ink, predictably obedient in any trained hand. As you complete the first line, you feel the beginning of that intimacy. This is your ink. You know its scent, its weight on the quill, its drying time. You fill the page, line by line. The list grows: beeswax, wicking, tallow for the lesser candles. Your letters gain a rhythm, a confidence. The black lines march across the creamy parchment, a stark, beautiful contrast. You are not just writing, you are painting with a pigment you conjured from goose dung, oak galls, and rust. The transformation feels complete, and yet it is just beginning. For this page will be stored, referenced, perhaps for decades. The ink will darken further, the tannins will slowly brown the parchment around each letter, cementing the words into the very fiber of the record. You dip the quill one last time, form the final abbreviation, and lift the nib. The word is done. The page is done. You sit back, your hand cramped, your heart full of a quiet, fierce pride. You have not just made ink. You have used it to make a fact. The completed inventory page is left on the desk to dry fully, a quiet monument to your day's labor. But the work of the scriptorium is cyclical, and the inkhorn is not yet empty. Brother Lucas appears at your side, not to critique your letter forms, but to point towards the future. He gestures to the horn, now about a third depleted, standing in its wooden holder. It is a good black, he acknowledges, the highest praise you are likely to receive. It will serve. But the horn is not a tomb. It is a well. And a well must be maintained. You learn that ink once made is not a static substance. As it sits even in its sealed horn, slow changes occur. Water can evaporate, subtly thickening it. The gum arabic can settle. The acidic content might slowly continue its work on any microscopic impurities. Before it is used for a truly important task, the copying of a psalter, the glossing of a theological text, it must be checked and, if necessary, refreshed. Brother Lucas shows you how. You pour a small amount from the horn into a shallow dish. You examine its consistency, rolling a drop between your fingers. It should feel slippery, not sticky. It should string slightly but not form globules. You add a minuscule amount of distilled rainwater, drop by drop, if it has thickened. If it seems too thin or lacks gloss, a tiny fragment of fresh gum arabic, dissolved in a thimbleful of warm water, can be stirred in. This maintenance is an act of respect. It acknowledges that the ink is a living collaboration between the maker and the materials, a balance that must be tended. The widely accepted historical fact is that the stability and longevity of iron gall ink vary wildly depending on the skill of its maker and the care of its keeper. Manuscripts that survive with ink still jet black and unfaded are testaments to this meticulous, ongoing stewardship. The ink you made is good, but its legacy depends on the attention it receives in the weeks and months to come. You are responsible for its life, not just its birth. The lesser-known, poignant detail is the personal connection a scribe could develop with his ink supply. Some gave their batches names, or marked their horns with personal sigils. In a life of communal ownership and anonymity, one's inkhorn and its contents could be a rare point of individual identity and pride. As you carefully stopper the horn after its checkup, you run your thumb over its smooth, polished surface. You imagine the gloss wearing away where hands will grip it, the bone spout darkening from repeated contact with ink. Historians still argue whether the famed consistency of ink within a single medieval manuscript is proof of a single large, perfect batch, or evidence of a scribe's exquisite skill in adjusting and maintaining a smaller supply over the long months of a copying project. Looking at the horn, you suspect it is the latter. Consistency is not a happy accident. It is a daily discipline. Brother Lucas then does something unexpected. He takes a small, sharp stylus and at the base of the horn, where it sits in its stand, he scratches a tiny, simple mark, a vertical line crossed by a shallow arc. It is not a letter. It is your mark. The mark you used when tallying gall collections on a wax tablet. So you will know it, he says and turns away. The gesture is immense. This horn, this ink is now under your custodianship. You will tend it, refresh it, and pour from it for the scribes. It is your first true station. The smell of the ink, once just a chemical process, now smells like belonging. The cramps in your hand from writing, the ache in your arms from grinding, they are not just pains. They are the signatures of your membership in an ancient, unbroken chain of makers. The ink is no longer a project. It is your charge. And somewhere in the future, on a page you will never see, in a book you may never touch, a line of profound, lasting black will whisper that you were here, that you paid attention, that you made this one thing well. The days begin to fold into one another, a gentle rhythm measured in canonical hours and the gradual emptying of the ink horn. Your world has contracted and expanded simultaneously, contracted to the quiet, dust-moted sphere of the scriptorium, the courtyard, the cellar, expanded to encompass the intimate secrets of oak galls, the patience of fermentation, the alchemy of green turning to black. You are no longer just a novice. You are the keeper of the ink. You refresh the batch in the horn with spring water when a hot day thickens it. You prepare the writing desks each morning, filling the small inkwells from your horn with its bone spout, the ritual as familiar now as the Pater Noster. You watch as Brother Lucas and the other scribes dip their quills into the ink you tended, their hands moving in a steady, graceful dance, their silence punctuated only by the scratch of nib on parchment and the soft sigh of a page being turned. The black lines flow from their pens, becoming letters, words, paragraphs of psalms, commentaries, and cartularies. Your ink is giving body to thought, to law, to prayer. You understand now that you are not at the end of a process, but in the gentle, sustained middle of it. The ink you made is a bridge. It is a bridge between the forest and the page, between the labor of your hands and the intellect of the scribe's mind, between this present moment and an unimaginably distant future. The widely accepted historical fact is that iron gall ink, when well made on good parchment, is one of the most durable writing mediums ever devised. The very chemical bite that slightly stains the parchment is what bonds the pigment irrevocably to it, allowing these marks to outlast frescoes on walls, paint on wood, even the stone of some monuments. The words you see being written today, in your ink, have a better chance of surviving the centuries than the very mortar holding up this monastery's walls. One afternoon, you are allowed to prepare a desk for a special task. Brother Lucas is beginning a new psalter for the abbot's personal use. The parchment is of the highest quality, thin and supple as cloth, flawlessly white. The inks to be used are not just yours. There is a pot of vermilion for initials, a small cake of lapis lazuli for the blue, a dish of beaten gold leaf. But the text, the countless words of the Psalms themselves, will be written in your black. As you pour the ink into the scribe's well, the liquid is so dark it seems to draw the light into it. You look at the blank parchment, soon to be a constellation of dark text illuminated by color and gold. Your humble, sour, laborious brew will provide the foundation upon which all that brilliance will rest. The black is the field, the colors are the flowers. One cannot exist without the other. The lesser known, final detail is the ink's own slow life after its work is done. On the page, over decades and centuries, it continues to change. The black may deepen further, or, if the ink was too acidic, it may eventually burn a tiny brown ghost of itself through the parchment. The gum Arabic binder can crystallize, giving old writing a faint, sugary sparkle under a raking light. The ink becomes a record not just of words, but of its own material history, a diary of chemical aging. Historians still argue whether the scribes themselves understood this long, slow afterlife of their work, or if they simply trusted in God's providence and the quality of their craft to preserve the word. As you watch Brother Lucas dip his quill into your ink and touch it to the pristine psalter page, you feel a pang of that responsibility, and a strange, quiet hope that the balance you struck, between potency and gentleness, will hold fast for 1,000 years. The light in the scriptorium softens to amber, then to gray. The scribes sand their pages, close their books, and leave in silence for vespers. You are the last to go. You clean the desks, you empty the rinse water, you check the stopper on your inkhorn. You run your finger once over your tiny mark at its base. Then you blow out the last tallow candle. The room is left in the deep, velvety dark, a darkness your ink would aspire to. The only sound is the sigh of the wind at the window. You close the heavy oak door behind you. The journey from the goose yard to this silence has been long, and it is complete. You have seen a thing through, from its most humble, malodorous beginning to its place on a page meant for eternity. The knowledge settles in you, not as a pride, but as a deep, abiding calm. You have participated in a miracle of ordinary things. You have taken the waste of birds, the scar of a tree, the rust of metal, and the tear of a distant acacia, and you have woven them into a means of speaking across time. The process is over. The legacy, just begun. And so, we leave the silent scriptorium, the scent of ink and parchment fading slowly into memory. The precise details of gall and gum, of vinegar and iron, can now soften at the edges, allowing the broader, quieter truth to settle around you like a well-worn cloak. You were there. You felt the gritty resistance of the gall under the pestle, the slick promise of the gum arabic, the patient wait for the green to turn. You witnessed the moment when chemistry became art, when a simple liquid became the vessel for a human voice meant to whisper long after the breath that formed it had stilled. It is a comforting thought, is it not? That something so permanent, so foundational to our memory of ages past, began in such ordinary, hands-on care. No mystery, just patience. No magic, just attention. The black line on the page is a covenant between the maker and the future, a promise whispered in tannin and iron that says, I was here, and this is what I believed was worth saving. Let that thought carry you now, away from the technicalities and into the realm of quiet wonder. The monks have gone to their prayers, the inkhorn rests in its stand, the psalter page waits for tomorrow's light. All is still, and all is as it should be. The meticulous work of preserving thought is done for the day, and the only task left is to rest, to let the images of oak forests and sunlit courtyards blend and soften into the welcoming dark. The journey is complete. The night is deep, and peaceful, and still.